Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Commodore Turner, and this is my most insane project yet. This is how I built a 1930s Art Deco ocean liner in Bloxburg. But starting a build like this isn't as easy as hopping onto Bloxburg and placing some walls. First, I need to design what I want this liner to be like, and I want this to be a 1930s Art Deco liner, based off ships like the Queen Mary, SS L'Antique, and SS Conte di Savoia. Then I got some exterior references, and I was really inspired by the likes of the SS America and the SS Andrea Doria. I took a drawing of the Andrea Doria off Shipbucket and severely altered it in Microsoft Paint, and this became my exterior plan. But building a vessel like this isn't just about the exterior. I have to design the floor plan and the interior spaces. And I need this floor plan to be accurate because I want this ship to have a massive emphasis on engineering accuracy. So come with me as I design and build this beautiful ocean liner. Now that we're finally in Bloxburg, after around 15 hours of planning, it's time to finally translate my drawings into the game. The way I did this was by creating a line of grey and red walls, and then putting a grid over my exterior plan, and using that to determine where everything should go so it matches the drawing. It's kind of like the technique I used to make my Zeppelin, but a bit more refined, as instead of eyeballing it like I did for the Battaglia, here everything was a lot more precise. This diagram shows visually what I'm doing. I can see that 1 wall into my plot is where the bow starts, 13 walls in is where my bridge front is, and 17.5 walls in is where my funnel starts. And after a while of building, we can see just how well this technique works. Once I had the rough shape laid out with walls, I went in with some basic shapes and some structurals to really get the exterior shape I was looking for. I want the ship to feel really massive on this small scale, which is why for every 1 floor in Bloxburg, the ship has 4 decks. After I finished adding a bit more shape, I moved on to the ship's smokestacks. I wanted to have 2 teardrop-shaped funnels based off the SS America and the SS United States, just without the fins on top, and I think they turned out pretty well. They're tall enough that they look really cool and imposing from below, but they're not big enough that they look disproportioned or goofy. It's safe to say, I was pretty happy with how the funnels turned out. My next task was creating the curve at the very front of the ship's superstructure. This curve will make the front of the ship look super clean and detailed and will help with the streamlined look I'm going for. It will also make the ship look similar to her much smaller successor, the TSS Pelagic, which I have a very similar video on if you're interested. This process always takes quite a while as it's very finicky and has to be perfect, because if it's even slightly off, it'll look terrible from above and it will buckle in the middle once I copy paste it over to the other side. All in all, it took me about an hour and a half to get this curve perfect. Next, it was time to make the bridge front. It was mostly based off the Andrea Doria, just a bit more streamlined and better aligned to the decks of this vessel. I made sure to add some supports for the bridge wings and more curves so the bridge front would look super clean and super streamlined, instead of blocky like it would look if I just used walls. And once I had all the curves of my bridge front done, I was really happy with how the vessel was coming along. My next job was to prep the exterior for a custom hull. Doing a custom hull is probably the most technical and complicated part of building a Bloxburg ship. It involves creating a massive grid of triangles and filling it in with shapes to give it curvature. However, in this video, I won't go through all the trouble of explaining how to actually do this, as I've covered it in another video that I'll link in the description. Now it's time to do the framing for my custom hull. The first thing I need to do for this is to create my pillars. These are the main structures of my hull frame. For this ship, I want a 3-sided hull, which just means the angle of the hull changes 3 times, and this means I need 3 pillars, 1 for the stem and 1 for each remaining corner. My pillars start really heavily curved and will slowly blend into a straighter pillar, which is what allows me to go from a really elegantly curved bow to straight for the ship's midship section. Once all my pillars are placed, I need to add structurals all over them. This is how I know where to put the triangles, but I also need to make sure I don't mess up the frame or I'll have to redo this entire side of the hull. Once I had the horizontal structurals in, I needed to add the verticals. The way to do this is by measuring the triangles and putting the structurals where they end. It's important to make sure your triangles do not go over a change in the hull's angle. As you can see, when I reach the end of one of my 3 sections, I place a smaller triangle so it doesn't go over. And now it's time to actually place in the triangles properly. This is the most time-consuming part of doing a custom hull, as it involves lining up the triangles with the frame so it looks smooth and seamless. Again, I don't really want to spend too much time on custom hulls in this video, but if you're interested or want to try it yourself, go watch my video how to build Bloxburg ships. All in all, planning and filling in the first half of my bow took me around 2.5 hours, and I was pretty happy with the result. Then, I had to finish off this side of the bow. That meant doing the rake and the shear. The rake is the very front of the ship and refers to the angle of the ship's stem, and the shear is the angle that the hull has on the horizontal axis. I achieved both of these with the use of more triangles. And once I had all my triangles placed, I had the first half of my bow completed, which is a quarter of my custom hull already done. Then I immediately started on the other half of my custom hull, only when I did this side, I accidentally used the same pillar twice, which I noticed when I had finished paneling the hull. This meant I needed to delete the hull and start over from scratch on the left side, which was really annoying and wasted around 2.5 hours of my time. As you can see from this clip, the left side of the hull looks very different from the right. So I deleted it and started from scratch, making sure this side was perfect. Because I'm not gonna settle for a subpar liner. And as you can see, it was definitely worth redoing as the hull looks immaculate now. Now that my bow was finished, I decided to get on with translating the drawings of my floor plan into the game. Since I was using a grid book to plan it out, it didn't take me long to translate and it came out pretty perfectly. Now if you're planning to do your own Bloxburg ship after this, I highly encourage you to go out and buy a grid book. You'll thank me later. The squares of grid books perfectly align with the squares in Bloxburg if you adjust it for the diagonal axis, and if your ship's on the straight axis, it's even easier. This is just a much better way to properly plan your ship so you don't waste Bloxburg money or time, because it's a lot easier to erase something on a page than to delete a million walls in game. Now even though I was really happy with my drawn out floor plan, don't be afraid to change it up a bit and experiment while you're in game. My final floor plan was very different from my final drawing, as you can see here. I've highlighted the areas I changed in my plan just so you can see how much changed from paper to Bloxburg. As you can see, the changes are pretty substantial. Most of it was because of plot data, but a lot of it was just because I wanted to add some more unique rooms. Like the dance hall I had in the bow was supposed to be very similar to the TSS Pelagic dance hall, but I thought to myself, why would I make pretty much the same room on both ships? So I switched it up and used that space for something really unique later down the line. Once I had my floor plan all done and I knew everything would fit inside, I returned to doing some exterior details like making the bases for the funnels nicer, adding some deck equipment like bollards, capstains, the anchor chains, and even the anchors themselves. I wanted to add some rust to the anchors since my friend and fellow shipbuilder Tegai always makes fun of my ships for looking too clean, so I hope you're happy, Mr. Telenuffer. Now that my exterior was starting to look really nice, I decided I would start on my interior spaces, and the first room on my to-do list was the reception room. I wanted to base it off the reception room of the TSS Pelagic, but make it more grand and a whole lot larger. The main centerpiece of the room would be a large circular seat that I would later surround with more seating. It wasn't intentional, but it kinda reminds me of the QE2. Then, I started working on some custom walls. As this is an Art Deco liner, I wanted to have some lines on the walls to really give it that Art Deco feel. Again, similar to the Pelagic, but just better. And I was determined to have no glitches like the Pelagic's custom walls and pillars had on this vessel. And it totally didn't take me over an hour to create the walls for this reception room. But once they were done and I'd added in some pretty cool windows, I decided to add in some further detail like pillars and finishing off the entrance to the grand staircase. Then, I made some pretty cool Art Deco wall lamps and then a custom door for the dining room which was based off the SS Normandy. But I soon ran into a problem. Money. These builds are all super expensive and super detailed, and I spend hundreds of hours grinding, building, planning, and editing. So if you guys haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so I can hit 2,000 subscribers. And if I hit 2,000 subscribers from this video, I'll do whatever the top comment says, so do your worst. My next job was to tackle the largest room on board, the Grand Dining Room. This room was based off the SS L'Antique, a French liner from the early 1930s. Her dining room is extremely beautiful, and I wanted to try and capture that beauty in my own style of interior design, combining aspects from the TSS Pelagic's dining room and coloring it to fit in with the rest of the design language I was going for on board this liner. The dining room is surrounded by massive windows and a large skylight, making the room feel bright and warm with lots of greenery and plants dotted around, mostly adorning the pillars separating the large windows that would overlook the promenade decks if the ship wasn't in 1:1 scale. Instead, the windows were represented with mirrors, like all the windows on board. However, a lot of shipbuilders prefer to use lightboxes for their windows on scaled vessels. However, I love to use mirrors. And after the new map came out and they changed the skybox, it looks even better now, and it really looks like there's nothing but clouds above the ocean, really selling the effect of being out at sea on a transatlantic crossing. And after a few more hours, my dining room was finally complete. I think I did a good job capturing the beauty of the SS L'Antique, but keeping it within my own build style. The dining room was decorated with two main pieces, a small Zeppelin as all my ship's dining rooms have Zeppelins, and the Hales Trophy, the award given to the fastest ship in the world, and this one is my most accurate recreation of the trophy yet. The room also has space for more than enough passengers, ensuring everyone on board gets a seat. Now that I had some decent exterior progress, it was finally time to stop procrastinating on finishing off the ship's stern. Now I did about half of this custom stern and I spent 4 hours straight on it, trying my very best to get it absolutely perfect. I ran into some real trouble shaping the stern as I was messing around trying to get my guide pillars perfect, and I used a bunch of crazy ideas and techniques trying to get the shape just how I wanted it, but I was still having some trouble. But it's important that when you run into trouble when building something complicated that you don't give up. Any normal person would have either given up or went back another day, but I was determined to get this stone done and I wasn't going to stop until I was happy with it. I'm not sure if this part of the video is a life lesson about not giving up or not going outside, so I'll let you guys decide. But nevertheless, after around 2 hours straight of moving my pillars around, I was finally able to start placing my triangles. And over the next hour, I fully panelled the first half of my stern. Now, any normal person would have taken a break after doing all that, but for some reason I didn't, and I just kept going, and I decided to undertake another very difficult part of this build, the figurehead. Now, there's a reason that my good friend T-Rex10 made the figurehead on my last ship, because I suck at statues and I know nothing about human anatomy. But after studying the figurehead on the Pelagic and quite literally looking at some human anatomy charts, I was ready to attempt it. And I think I did pretty well, and I ended up making her head a little bit smaller later down the line, but for my first statue, I was pretty happy with it. But just as everything was going really well, something terrible happened. Auto building has started to become a serious issue in the community.
No one is doing anything, not the developers, not the moderators, and it just keeps getting worse and worse.
It's getting to a point where this exploit has gone too far.
The TSS Perigee in her half-completed state was stolen by auto builders. If you're unaware, auto builders are hackers that steal the IDs of your plot so they can replicate it and have your build on their plot, and they've been targeting the Bloxburg pro building community for years. And since this was a very special project to me that I'm spending hundreds of hours on, having it stolen was an absolute plummet of morale. But I wasn't about to let this slide. How these auto builders work is they operate through Discord servers where people pay a subscription for the exploit, and every plot they steal becomes available for anyone that has the exploit to then steal. The plot IDs are literally right out in the open. And now my flagship, everything I had worked so many hours to plan and build, was up for anyone to take, and there was nothing I could do. I even talked to one of the moderators of the server, but instead of understanding how important this project was to me, he just put a bounty on my head, pinging over 3,000 people and offering Robux for stealing my ship. And since the ID was public at the time, this was pretty much just free money. However, after hours of negotiations with the moderator, I was finally able to have mine and other members of my community's ships removed from the list of plots.
Alright bro, your builds haven't removed them.
Okay, so is the access to the build ID... I don't know how this works. The access to the build ID is like gone, correct?
Yeah, hold on, actually, wait. Yes, okay, it should be removed.
And even if I want these people eradicated from the Bloxburg community, I'm still gonna hide all the names of the people involved and the name of the server. But if anyone from the Bloxburg team wants this information, I have it in a Google Doc, so please send me a DM. I will happily send you the information to get these people banned and these servers taken down. Even though I was devastated that the Pelagic was auto-built, I had already done everything I could do and I just needed to put my best foot forward and continue to work on the ship. I decided to begin work on the most technical interior room, the lounge. This room was based off the lounge of the SS Conde di Savoia and sports a beautiful curve akin to the one found on the front of the exterior. One thing I really wanted in this space was a sort of light crown molding connecting the ceiling and walls. It took me about an hour to come up with the design I used and it was starting to look super clean. And I was planning to just add some mirrors on top of these panels, but I couldn't help but think it looked really cheap, so I decided to recess them. Even though this meant I needed to delete all of my custom walls, redo them, and place them back, it was so worth it. Especially with the bigger windows that are off to the side. And I was still able to attach the lights I made previously to these new wall panels so they didn't go to waste. Next, I added the door that you can find on the exterior so that this really looks like an interior that perfectly matches the ship's exterior. The next room on my agenda was the smoking and reading room. However, after a bit of trial and error, I realized this space was just too big for what I wanted to do with it. So after a bit of adjustment, I ended up splitting this room into 3 areas. A forward smoking room right before the lounge, a bar that would also work as the doors for the cabin corridors in the center, and a small area for the staircase at the rear. And after a bit more planning and adjustment, I was really happy with the new layout of this space, and I was ready to get started. The first area I tackled was the bar. I more or less based it off the bar I put on the Pelagic, however I made sure this one was a lot more detailed and also a lot larger. And since I had already done the staircase area was more or less already completed, even though I went in and added some further details later down the line. Then, I started to work on the smoking room. This was my chance to build some really nice tables for card games, again similar to what I did on the Pelagic. I ended up doing some more cool custom windows, but I did end up changing these later down the line to add some plot data. And I ended up making a chair based off the Normandy smoking room that I did a bit later on, but this was a room I was really happy with by the end of the build. After I finished those 3 areas, I decided to complete my exterior. This meant finishing the custom stone, which took me around an hour and a half. I still had a lot of small details to add to the exterior, but for now the hull was completed, so I decided to start working on my boilers. The location of my boiler room was super important and super accurate, as most Bloxburg ship's boiler rooms are next to or on the side of the engine rooms, however this isn't super accurate. Boiler rooms are supposed to be located right beneath the ship's funnels, hence why the Perigee's boiler room is right next to the dining room. I ensured that the boilers were directly below the funnels, giving the ship another layer of engineering accuracy. These boilers were based off the Queen Mary of 1934, and more specifically, they're called Yarrow boilers. Most Yarrow boilers look like this, and it's the design found on the TSS Pelagic and the TSS Pearlescent, however this design was a lot more common for larger liners. I even contacted a steam engineer friend of mine to help me understand this version of the Yarrow boiler so I could more accurately rebuild it in Bloxburg, and after around 2 hours, I was finally done with my boiler room, and I was super happy with it. Speaking of the engineering accuracy I wanted in this vessel, it was time for me to build the engines themselves. For this ship, I wanted to construct the aftermost engine room. A vessel like this sporting Parsons steam turbines would have 2 very similar engine rooms, and each room would have 4 turbines. 2 main turbines for the outboard propellers, and then 2 astern turbines, which would allow these propellers to spin in reverse. This is because the fans inside the turbines can only spin in one direction, so for the ship to be able to go astern, it requires a whole extra set of turbines. Hence why this vessel that has 4 propellers would have 8 turbines. However, just because of the space and plot data, I opted to only build the rear engine room, but both forward and after engine rooms would look more or less the same, only the forward room would be slightly longer due to the curvature of the vessel's hull. As I said before, this ship is powered by Parsons steam turbines, which is my favourite type of engine. I've actually built this type of engine twice before to varying levels of success.
Brother, what's that? What's that, brother?
However, after a lot of research, I finally built an accurate steam turbine room, and it puts the Pelagics to absolute shame. But what makes this engine room really special is all the other little nerdy stuff I put in, like the turbine generators behind the main and astern turbines, air condensers, steam pipelines, control panels, watertight doors, and a ton of other small details. Now that my engine room is complete, I have a few more things to do around the vessel. I want to have a couple of stores aboard where passengers can buy books, flowers, or dresses, and I wanted these rooms to have cool curved windows, and I think they turned out really great. And since these rooms were made with shapes, I couldn't add real doors, so I made some more custom ones. After I finished the layout of the stores, I decided to add some further details to the smoking room by adding some maps. You'll find maps all over the ship because I think they make great detail. Then, I went through and added some small things around the vessel, including air conditioning units, which really helped the vessel feel real. Another detail I wanted to add was an exterior pool, which I added to the space of the dining room. I made use of carpets so that players could walk through the water and actually use the pool. This is because, like the TSS Pelagic, passengers can shrink down to the toddler scale and actually use the exterior, and I even added some awesome deck chairs that really bring the exterior to life. My next job was to tackle the top deck. So far, all it had was a bridge and a small area to access the staircase, but I wanted to add a little more to the vessel, so I decided to put in a promenade deck and a barber shop as a reference to one of my earlier ships, the RMMV Petunia 2. I wanted massive floor-to-ceiling windows for my promenade deck, and by adding more light boxes inside the walls than usual, I was able to make the room feel like it was filled with lots of natural lighting. I only wish it was possible to get the beautiful sun rays Bloxburg has into my ship's interior, but as of right now, that's just not possible. By now, I was on about 90% plot data with the extra 40%, and I still had to do all of my cabins. I wanted the cabins on this ship to be pretty simple, and mostly be based off the SS Rex and the SS Conti di Savoia. I know a lot of other pro shipbuilders love doing cabins, but I much prefer doing public rooms, exterior details, and especially engines. Hence why the cabins for this ship were so low on my list of priority, and why I left minimal plot data for them. However, I was still going to get hard to work to make some clean Art Deco cabins. The ship will have a passenger capacity of 10 passengers, which really isn't a lot. However, my main focus for this ship was accuracy and massive passenger spaces instead of a high capacity. Because back in 2023, I made a ship where the main priority was capacity, and it didn't go amazingly. Now, each cabin on board has a different theme, like how the Pelagic's cabins were based off different types of trees. Now, I wanted to do this again, since the feel of the ship is very green and filled with plants, it would make a lot of sense to have tree cabins again. But like how I didn't want to repeat the dance hall in the bow, I didn't want to reuse the same idea from the Pelagic, so I decided to go the complete opposite direction with the cabins, and have the themes as Ocean Liner, Zeppelin, and Train. But anyway, after a few hours, my cabins were coming along pretty well, and I copied over the Train and Zeppelin cabins on the opposite side of the ship, but I didn't copy over the ocean liner one as I wanted to add something really unique in its place. One of the last major things I needed to add were the dresses in the display in the reception room. A good friend and moderator of the BSL server, Katie, designed a bunch of dresses based off people's Bloxburg ships, and I wanted to recreate the dresses for the TSS Pelagic and the TSS Perlison in this area. However, I wasn't super happy with the dresses I made, so I ended up deleting them and replacing them with a screenshot of the dresses that I made in another plot, just because I couldn't add the level of detail that I wanted thanks to plot data. Still, I think my workaround went really well, and I think the dresses look great on display. As of right now, you've seen about 180 hours of the 220 hours I spent on this project, and it was finally time to reveal the ship to the public, because before this, no one knew what the interior looked like. So when the time finally came, I revealed this ship to the world, the TSS Perigee. But it wasn't just my community that was loving the vessel so far.
My handle is Rainhill1829, and I'm a Class 4 power engineer in Alberta, Canada, and my background is primarily in heritage steam.
We've got our boiler room here. So these are the boilers, the Yarrow boilers based with Queen Mary, that I talked to you about to get a bit of a deeper understanding on what they look like.
Yeah.
So
It
just
looks astonishingly like them, yes.
Really, I was a little worried that I may have got something slightly wrong, but from initial impression,
that's
I would
beautiful.
say this is very accurate.
Yeah, no, that's stunning. Yeah, no, yeah, thinking back on the diagrams we were looking at and the photographs that we were looking at, yeah, no, that's shockingly similar.
Okay, well, I'm very happy to hear that.
And now that our special guests have seen the vessel, I think it's time you finally get to see it. And with that, the TSS Pelagic is complete. This has been my largest project so far, and man was it a journey. I spent over 220 hours on this ship, and I think it's safe to say I topped the TSS Pelagic. If you want to support me and my channel, you can always subscribe, or you can buy a signed TSS Pelagic poster with the link in the description. And make sure you join my Discord server. It's a massive hub of Bloxburg shipbuilding and voyage roleplays. But really, I just want to say thank you. There's so many amazing people that contributed to this project, and I can't thank you enough. my name's Commodore Turner, and thank you very much for watching.